Hello, you beautiful people! It is another episode of League Unlock, and yes, it is Power Rankings time, and we are sticking true and going through some LPL action. Even though we're already 2 days into Week 4, we're going a little bit back in time, and we're going to be going through Week 3 in China, because we can't keep up. We can't keep up with how quickly these games are flying out of the gate. But we're still going through. We're just doing 10-1. We're not doing all 17 teams just like we did last weekend. And let's get into the board. It's a lot of the same teams, but in very different order than we saw in Week 2. Starting at number 10, it is LNG, who just had the head-to-head match against Suning, which is why they are one spot ahead of them. They played on Tuesday morning, and it was a back-and-forth affair, although you could say there's a chance Suning could have won that series in 2 matches. Obviously didn't end up being the case, but a lot of storylines between those two squads, with Maple going up against his former squad and SFM doing the exact same on the opposite end for Suning, and it is SFM or SOFM, I think it's SFM, who comes away with the win. Big Dragon Steel and all of the sorts, but Suning, similar records because of that head-to-head. They are up a spot. The big drop, and I do mean big drop of the week, is RNG. They had an 0-2 performance in Week 3, and it was a couple of 0-2s. Now, the one against FPX is a little bit forgivable because they did... they were competitive at the very least in one of those matches before FPX completely pumped them in the other. But going 0-2 against Vici, who is a team that has been struggling all split long, definitely looked like one of the bottom 4 teams in the LPL, losing 2-0 to them is something you cannot forgive as easily. Xiaohu didn't look as good this week. XLB was fine, but RNG right now doesn't look like they're at the top of the table, at least after Week 3. We were absolutely talking about them being there after Week 2. But a lot changes when there's so many games played on any given week in the LPL. But RNG down 4 spots to number 8. TES, Top Esports, we talked about on Monday. They've been a little bit underwhelming. They still do climb up this week because, to be honest, their schedule wasn't anything particularly impressive that they had to get through, but they did come away with a couple of wins, so you got to acknowledge that. And we poo-pooed, I would say, on RNG for losing to Vici. It took TES 3 games, but they still did take them down. They lost to IG in 2. They got swept by them, and they 2-0'd Demo. So a couple of series wins is enough for them to climb up a couple of spots when you combine these other squads not performing as well. OMG, really only one game to talk about from the last time we talked about power rankings, because on the Monday they played BLG and beat them. They 2-0'd Demo. That's enough. I mean, just one game, again, compared to what these other teams did below them. It's enough to bring them up a spot. Still one of the early surprises in the spring split is how well OMG has looked, and the fact just that they're above 500 is a surprise enough for me. We move into the top 5, and it's familiar squads. EDG is the newest member to come in at 4-3, and you'll notice there's a lot of teams tied at that 4-3 spot, 4-2, right hovering around that playoff bubble. Remember, it is 8 teams in the LPL that make it to playoffs. But EDG into the top 5. They have that series win that they got against Estar, the only loss that the rookies have put forward. That was less to do with EDG playing out of their minds and Estar playing out of their minds for the very wrong reasons. But that being said, EDG still, for all the roster issues and coaching missing links that they've had because of all the coronavirus, EDG still looking like a legit playoff contender. Scout, Mako, and Hope has stepped up in a big way, and even some of the rookies that have come in top and jungle have played at a very serviceable level. EDG, because they got that series win against JDG, who are still a spot ahead of them, but enough to bring EDG into that top 5. JD goes down a couple of spots because of that aforementioned matchup against EDG that they did lose. They still 2-0'd BLG. They still beat Vici, but those have been easier squads to talk about and to get wins against. So JDG down a couple of spots because the top 3 have looked incredibly impressive, and IG is out of that top spot. A lot of that almost entirely because of that head-to-head against Estar, where they got absolutely smacked in back-to-back games. Still not concerned about IG. They still look like, at times, they don't really like to play macro. If they're not fighting across the map, left, right, and center, then they definitely struggle a little bit more than some of the other top teams in the LPL. But the individual talent is still absolutely world-class for the former world champions. They're still legit contenders to win the spring title, but right now they're down a couple of spots to that third spot because of Estar, because of how good they have looked. And listen, if you remove that EDG game, which I love to do because it seems like an anomaly. That's the word of the week that I'm going to use when describing that matchup. Estar have been incredible, the most exciting team of the LPL season to watch, tied closely with FPX, but Estar, because of that head-to-head dominant win against IG, who everyone, and rightfully so, were talking about as the best team in China. They hadn't dropped the series, all split long. Because of that dominant act or performance that they did, combined with them beating up on the lower tier teams that they should for the most part, Estar just look like they have a perfect read on the meta. There's not really a weak link. Maybe you talk about topside for them, but he matched up against the Shy fine. Even playing a Maokai into Rumble and did absolutely fine. So there's not really a big weakness on this Estar squad. That is another reason people like to compare it to Griffin, is not only are they a bunch of rookies dominating the scene, but you could maybe say top lane is the weakness for them, but not even close to the level that Sword ever was for Griffin. FPX also had a big climb this week. They continue to completely annihilate. They won 3 series since we last talked about them on the power rankings. And by the way, every single one of them was a 2-0, including that incredibly impressive win against RNG. They haven't lost, let alone a series, they haven't lost a game since they beat JD Gaming 2-1. It took them 3 games. Since then, they have just been annihilating the rest of the LPL. DoinB leads the league with 7 MVP awards. LWX looks incredibly consistent. Gimgoon has actually looked better than he did throughout a lot of 2019. Tien is slowly getting back to that world finalist MVP level performance. So FPX, yeah, they still have 2 losses, but who knows? They could go the rest of the split with only losing 2 losses, and then they're right on pace for all that they did throughout the rest of 2019. That's your 10-1 in the LPL. We'll continue to bring you highlights from China throughout the week and be back again next week for more LPLP rankings.